Cliff Joannou, editor-in-chief at Attitude magazine, the world's largest gay media brand. I've been with the magazine for 8 years, but I remember as a reader years ago how early on the out gay stars that there was on the cover were few and far between, and they were scattered between straight males and pop divas. Today, it's really wonderful to see the representation that happens and how diverse it is and how we get to celebrate so many out gay stars. It's just so radically different to where Attitude was 30 years ago when it first began. So today at Student Pride, we're going to look at queer representation on film and TV with some very special guests. But first up, we're going to have to spend some one-on-one time with somebody who's one of our most celebrated television writers. I know you're gagging to get up. Just let me introduce you first. He is somebody who, on more than one occasion, has literally shifted social attitudes and opened people's minds and hearts. And
you can really
in a more powerful way than many of our politicians have ever had or had the determination to. Like, he's literally... His TV shows have actually opened on heads and changed it, social attitudes to things like HIV, to queer sex, to history opening up from 30 years ago that was forgotten for so long with It's a Sin. He's a man who can find humanity in the otherworldly. He can tug at our heartstrings and our emotions with drama in one sentence and then deliver levity and joy in the next. Please welcome Russell T. Davies.
Hello. Hello, darling. I was told to go there.
Are you going there? Oh, let me come here because it's really far away.
Hello.
So, Russell.
Oh, is it me and you first? Oh,
just you and I. Then the kids are going to come out.
When you see the people waiting off stage for the next bit, their combined age is less than mine. So it's it is.
This is quite fortuitous timing. It wasn't intended. I'd love to say we planned it. But yesterday marked 25 years of Queer as Folk.
I know, amazing. The blank faces, because you're all too young to have seen it.
When you did that TV show, though,
yeah.
Did you anticipate that 25 years ago, 25 years later, people would still be standing here and talking, even just before, a couple of the kids came up and said how much of an impact it had on you?
No, it's delightful. It's kind of what you hope for. But actually, you can't name many dramas from 25 years ago. And for that to be a great big queer drama like that is really, well, it makes my heart glow, to be honest. I'm really pleased. I'm really proud of everyone who was in it.
Were there any nerves when you put that to TV and it was going to be aired?
Oh, yeah. There were a lot of different reactions. There were a lot of nerves. There were, actually, what doesn't get reported is within the television industry, there were a lot of people taking the piss, ready for it to become disastrous. There were a lot of people, they were like middle-aged, white, straight executives who went up to one of the producers going, oh, how's your gay drama? Like that, like it was going to be so dreadful and so cliched and so full of tragedy, you know, and fake gay characters kind of thing. So a lot of people were expecting that. And obviously it got criticism of the tabloids, it got a lot of criticism from the gay press as well. But, I mean, that took the team by surprise. I was kind of ready for that because I'm a gay man, so I've read the magazines, I've been there, I kind of know the culture, so I was ready for it in a way. Yeah.
What was the worst criticism you read?
The worst, it was the normal Daily Mail. I mean, people calling it, actually, the worst was my mother, who said it was soft porn. She genuinely, I took it home that Christmas on VHS to show my mother before it went out on television, because I thought that's very wise. And she was genuinely shocked by it, genuinely. I mean, she was 70, you know? And then actually, just after transmission was her 70th birthday, and there were people who didn't come to her birthday party because I was going to be there. And they genuinely, if you're 70, you genuinely thought that was pornography. So, you know, I'm not surprised at that reaction. So that was kind of, it was tough, but it doesn't stop me, you know?
I know we're live streaming, but it'd be remiss not to talk about that rimming scene. When you put that in, that was a very, very bold move.
Yeah.
At what point did Channel 4 say that's okay to go in?
I think, do you know there was almost no discussion about it whatsoever, because I think everyone was so surprised that it was there, and no one wanted to appear to be a prude. And it was there very, very carefully. It was very, very chosen. It was deliberately put in. Here I am, 25 years later, talking about rimming. But it was like, it was very much chosen so that it was a sexual experience that Nathan hadn't even imagined. You know, he would have fantasized about men, he would have imagined what men get up to, and bear in mind how little information he would have had at that time.
But it demystified
Yes.
queer sex.
Yes.
In one scene,
Yes.
it was like, we do lots of things.
And yes, he kind of laid out a stall, saying that's how far we're going. And genuinely, no one tried to stop it because I think maybe some people didn't know what it was, and no one wanted to be the prude who kind of piped up saying, "Isn't that going too far?" So no one actually stopped it. I'd love to know what the sign language over there is for rimming. What's rimming? Thank you.
Every day's a school day. No, but it was. If it was on the BBC, it would be to educate, inform, and entertain, all there in one scene.
Very true. To this day, I can't believe we got away with it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, where do you think? Because we're talking about representation, the changes over the years. Like, it was 1999.
Yeah.
So, where do you think Stuart, Vince, and Nathan would be today, 25 years later?
Oh, I never really think about that really, because people say, where are they now? And I said, they're not real. They just live a story. You know, the story ends and they go. They don't have a real life that carries on. I'm sorry to be this really disappointing answer, but I don't actually sit and imagine them, what they're doing now. They were of their moment, and actually the world has changed. The truth is, if you did Queer as Folk now, oh my God, you'd have trans characters in there, you'd have a better racial mix in there. It's like, so in some ways, that 25 years has left that program behind, which is exactly what should happen. That's right, that's fair, it should look dated now, and you move on. So that's all good.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with something that looked dated as long as we've learned
No,
to move forward.
as long as there's new stuff happening now. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And speaking of new stuff, you went on to create Cucumber 15 years later.
I did, yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting moment of representation, because I feel like it was probably 5 years ahead of its time.
Oh, do you? Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
in as much as
Wow.
even then, what was it, 2015?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, even then in 2015, we were so starved of authentic representation, let alone middle-aged gay men who had sex lives, that when you're starved of representation, when you do see it, if you don't recognize it as yourself, you reject it.
Yes.
And I think that happened a lot with Cucumber.
It's many things, but thank you for that. I agree. I mean, it didn't work. It died a death as a show. I love it. I stand by.
It's brilliant. It was
thank you.
absolutely so well written, and it's through a spotlight on part of queer society that doesn't have stories told. Middle-aged.
Yes, middle-aged life and fear of penetration. It's 8 hours about fear of penetration, which I know so many couples who go through that, so many men who go through that, and it's one of the great taboo. I kind of hoping it would break open a taboo about talking about that, and it didn't. The door just shut straight on it like that. Like it's a fascinating subject. But although maybe you just want to watch sexy boys dancing rather than people having problems with penetration. I don't know. But no, I'm very proud of it, and what it did do, it was the start of me. It was a show called Cucumber. It had a spin-off called Banana, and Banana was about the supporting characters in Cucumber, and they were a much wide. You know, I'm trapped in my role of writing about the gay male, and that's what I write well. But the spin-offs from it, and the other characters in Cucumber had much more trans representation, lesbian representation, asexual representation, I would say, with one of those characters. And even if we weren't quite defining it that much, but. So it was a start of doing that. It was the start of me opening my eyes and the channel opening its eyes a bit and saying there's more stories to tell, there's more stuff to say. So, I mean, if anything, thank you for saying it's 5 years ahead of its time. You could say that it was late. You know, it's like, why wasn't that there in 2010?
Everything could have happened sooner. It's incredible television that for anybody in this room hasn't seen it, it's really powerful. And again, it was well ahead of where the media should have been. Because I remember I joined Attitude a year later.
Yes. Yeah.
And at the time, the magazine was still struggling to get an acceptable amount of out gay cover stars, because there were few and far between.
Yes, still the case.
Well, actually,
not much better than it was.
It's much easier today, because naturally the younger stars have grown up being out and open in their day-to-day lives, so they haven't had to go back into the closet in their careers. But I remember, like a year later after Cucumber, it was Ollie Alexander who came out.
Yes.
And then suddenly it just felt like there was a shift in music, in film, in TV.
Just keep shifting, doesn't it? Yeah, I think that's the thing. Yeah, keep shifting. And, but I think there's also I never relax about it because I think there's always a great danger it's going to shift back. I think our rights are paper thin. Paper thin. You just have to look at America now, where it's becoming terrifying, where they're banning IVF now. It's like we've got a monstrous right-wing movement in which we are the enemy, heading towards us.
It's almost, you're almost prescient in that when you wrote years and years.
Well, it's not prescient to see this coming. It's like, it's there every day.
I mean, you talked about Ukrainian refugees and that, you talked about climate crisis, all sorts.
It's just, aren't we all terrified by November? November 24 could be like a turning point for the whole world, a terrible time. But we must fight.
Indeed. And then It's a Sin came along.
Yes.
And again, it was a massive cultural shift. Like, you changed the conversation around HIV and AIDS, which in mainstream circles hadn't been discussed since the worst of the crisis in the 80s and early 90s. Everyone just forgot HIV and AIDS existed, unless you were a queer person, unless you're a gay person, and you had to consider safer sex. But then It's a Sin came along and said, this happened, and it had such a huge impact. Did you ever anticipate?
Never. No, that's the greatest surprise and delight of my entire professional life. It's hard to talk about It's a Sin and use words like delight because the subject matter is so tough and so sad and so many lives were lost. So I think, Nathaniel's here today, all of us, we all kind of kept saying, let's go out for dinner and celebrate how successful it is. And we never quite did, because it's actually hard to go, hooray, we did well, about something that's actually so terrible. But nonetheless, forgive me if I take a deep breath and say, my God, that was a success. And which, if you'd seen us, it went out in January, and if you'd seen us in December, we were having to do all the publicity and launch it and do interviews and stuff like this. And we literally had our head in our hands. Please watch it, please. You hear the words, it's an age drama for Channel 4. And you think, oh, I'm busy. I'll watch something on Netflix, thanks very much. We were expecting a zero audience of absolutely no one. And we also expected I was expecting a lot more anger, because I know it's such a contentious subject. And I was expecting and I made some very big choices in that. And I was expecting a lot of people who had lived through those years to be much more angry and say, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you didn't show this. So there was a bit of that, there were people saying you didn't show what lesbians did in that time and stuff like that, which is fair enough as a criticism, it's like, but no drama ever does that. No drama shows what everyone did everywhere. So I was expecting criticism and indifference. So then, and actually it's the cast were the most magical thing, to see them taking off like they did, and all of them became, without being asked, without being taught, became ambassadors for HIV. I mean, it was weird. We were all being asked on every single chat show in Britain. I ended up on Peston. I was on Peston. God, what am I doing here? I was thinking, oh, please don't ask me something about Northern Ireland or something. It's like, I was dreading it. So it had an extraordinary reach that was an honour. It's like, because I know and you know, all those people, I mean, in some ways you feel bad. It's why it's hard to celebrate, because and I know people who've worked for those charities for 30 years, 40 years, and can't get on ITV, who would love to get on Peston, would love to be headlines about this and that. And we come along with a television show, go, hooray, like that, and steal everyone's seat. So it's strange in that sense as well.
But that's where television has its power. I mean, look at the post office scandal.
The post office thing.
I was actually on I was watching a panel this week about how, for I think 15 years, the journalists were trying to get this story exposed. But it's the power of television
Drama
and shifting social attitudes that tells us how important representation is in all its forms, not just queer, but also for highlighting racism,
everything,
disability,
trans stories,
all
absolutely.
sorts.
I mean, I think the post office drama has kind of emboldened all of us in a way, because people were telling us those days are over and no one watches mainstream drama and there's no movement, there's no big group audience that gets passionate about things, and along comes the post office of all things and proves that wrong. So it's kind of, again, it's delightful, terrible subject matter, but a delightful reaction. Yeah, good for them.
So now you're going intergalactic.
Doctor Who, back to Doctor Who. Hooray.
Incredible.
Yeah, happy days.
I've seen before in your conversation with Ali Nentrop, you said sometimes you plan scenes and you plan characters and things decades, years in advance, and they'll just fester around in your head until they manifest.
Sometimes, yeah.
So when did this queer doctor come into formation for you?
Oh, well, to be honest, that really came in when Ncuti Gatwa walked through the door. To be honest, if
So Ncuti first, and then...
yeah, I mean, that's me. You're always going to it's always going to be queer when I'm there.
Yeah.
But there's no way around that. But, if a fantastic straight white woman had walked in and stolen the part, we'd now be talking about how fantastic she's going to be. I mean, obviously, I'm going to maybe I've got a natural bent, excuse the pun, to like someone to correspond with that kind of energy when he walks in the room. And it was interesting because I did the audition with them. I was actually reading in with them, so I actually got to spark off him and stuff like that. But no, I mean, he would have got the part no matter what. I'm just lucky to be alive and in charge of a mainstream program in the years when he left sex education, because he's an absolute star. I sit watching him thinking he's just going to be the next, in 5 years' time or something, and certainly in 10 years' time, he'll be the next James Bond or something. He'll be an absolute superstar. And I'll be in the crowd going, "Do you remember me?" And I really mean that. The man is made of gold dust.
So how involved are you in the casting shows? Speaking about representation, this is a very queer Doctor Who.
Oh, but only because he was, and bear in mind that I shouldn't put words in his mouth. I'm not.
But all the other people involved.
Yes.
As well.
But like I said, it's going to be a queer old show with me there, and Phil, our producer, is gay as well. And I believe, even when David Tennant was the Doctor, and that's the lovely, straightest straight man in the world, and the greater trans ally you could not find, actually, and supporter of all our causes. Nonetheless, very straight. But the show was still very gay. There's something very gay about Doctor Who, full stop. In that it's not about snogging. It's not about founding a family. It's all about racing off across the universe and meeting strange-looking things and loving them. So that's like a night out in Manchester, really.
And it has hope. That's the most
It has
powerful
hope.
thing.
Yes, and it's not macho. He or she doesn't carry a gun, and so by taking away the gun, it's automatically a bit gayer. Gosh, I never thought of this before. Actually, these thoughts are happening live on stage.
Well, it's got a sonic screwdriver, so
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
make of that what you will.
You can mend things. Yeah.
So I think we're going to bring our other panel on now.
I know, enough for me. I thought we were all coming on together. I'm so sorry.
Russell,
These
we
people
need
are
our
much
time with
more
you.
beautiful and interesting, and I want to hear what they've got to say.
So first up, we have Noah Thomas from Everything Now.
Hello, darling.
Nathaniel Curtis from It's a Sin.
No, I know.
Belle Priestley, Heartstopper. And the wonderful Jack Wolfe from Shadow and Bone. Oh my gosh, look at you all. Now, when we speak about representation, literally, we're seeing the embodiment of it here in terms of just how I could never have imagined just 5, maybe 10 years ago, there being such a wealth of queer characters on TV, and not just film shows which are about queerness, but also it being integrated into the storylines authentically and just naturally. I want to know, actually, from our panel here, when was the first time you saw yourself represented on TV?
Hello.
Who was the first character that you saw yourself in?
That's a really good question. So when I was growing up, I wasn't a very good sleeper. I was a bit of a childhood insomniac, and in my bedroom, we had one of those TV VHS combo things.
Yes.
And in the middle of the night, if I couldn't sleep, I'd turn on, I think it was Channel 5. It used to just play these really random films all the way through the night. So I got a lot of my film education from watching these really bizarre random films from all over the world. But I really remember watching this film that was called Camp, and it came out I think in 2003. It was directed by Todd Graff, and it's about performing arts camp in America. And it was the first time I think I'd seen queer characters. It was the first time I saw a character in drag. He goes to prom in drag, and I remember more so than understanding how great it was to see those characters. It was moments between characters of recognizing. I was so young and recognizing, oh, I think that's how I feel, or that feels so much more like me than other things do. That's the first thing that comes to my head. I also think growing up, queer kids claim media that isn't necessarily written to be queer. So there's loads of films that I have claimed as part of my queer upbringing that I don't think the writers or directors ever had that in mind. But they just...
I always used to found Skeletor and He-Man quite camp and fabulous.
Yeah, but it's this thing where it doesn't necessarily just capture the queer experience specifically, but it captures moments or feelings or nuances within my specific queer experience really, really well. There's a film, Brother Bear, like that's a Disney film that I can't watch anymore. It just makes me cry because there's something really like sweet or like human about this like hero worship or need for found family or these things, these specific themes that I think really reach out and touch sort of queer audiences without the people making it ever having that intention. So I think a lot of that in my upbringing too. Sorry, that was about 2 hours long of an answer.
That's fine. Take your moment. Noah.
Oh, sorry.
Go, Belle.
I thought we were going down there.
We'll go along the line. It's easier.
I think it sounds really basic, but like, so I got quite badly bullied at school, so I used to take a lot of time off school, and like Hannah Montana was like always on the TV, and it was like, obviously I hope most of you have seen Hannah Montana, but it's obviously the superstar girl who like wears wigs and has like an alter ego and a whole different life that no one knows about, and I was very sort of early in my transition or sort of realizing my transness, and I just really related to that. I thought like she was super cool. I love Miley Cyrus, so yeah. Anyway, less deep answer, but yeah, not the same that was.
I don't know. I think, so there's a film called My Beautiful Laundrette, which has Daniel Day-Lewis in it, and I think, especially as I'm half Indian and half English, and I think seeing a brown queer person on screen, even now, isn't particularly common. So I think My Beautiful Laundrette really, really did change my life. It's about a man from South Asian heritage who goes to help run his uncle's laundrette, and he runs into an old flame, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, and it's kind of like getting back in touch with those feelings that he had when he was growing up, and then trying to figure out how they sit in the South Asian community. And I think that I'm still yearning to see more of brown representation in queer media, and I think that that was the first time that I saw something I was like, it was interesting to watch because I could actually see, it's not a camp film at all. It's actually like everyone's like fighting all the time, but it's the first time that I saw myself and I actually recognized a positive trait in it.
Noah.
Me. Me now. Mine's a few. Bend It Like Beckham is a big one.
Oh,
Right, Bend It Like Beckham. Just because I think, and it's actually nothing to do with football. I don't give a about football. I don't care about football. But it's just of like the idea of someone doing something that they're passionate about and that going against the grain and going against the norm, and that's kind of what happened with like me and acting. It's just there's no creative acting people in my family or in anyone I ever knew, and so I did almost feel a bit kind of isolated by that, because at school I was always that sort of strange kid that knew what they wanted to do from kind of the age of like 5. And people going, what do you mean you're going to be an actor? I'm like, no, I mean, I'm going to go and be an actor. That's what I'm going to do. And people go, yeah, but like, what you really going to... No, I'm going to be an actor. And Jess in Bend It Like Beckham was going, I'm going to be a footballer. Like, you don't believe me, but that's what's going to happen. So that's probably one of them. Then the other one, there's a great show, and if anyone's never seen it, they have to go and watch it. It's called Some Girls, and it used to be on BBC Three, like, you know the show, like 2011, 2012 time, and they filmed in Croydon. I'm from South London, so it felt very reminiscent of my school experience, and it was about these 4 friends, each of them from different backgrounds. The lead character was a young black girl, and it was so nice because it was like the girls that I went to school with and the girls that I recognized, and they spoke the way that me and my friends spoke. They acted the way, they got in the same kind of silly dramas and dilemmas, and yeah, it was just very nice to see what actual South London looks like, rather than kind of, it was, we love Top Boy, but it's like not everyone's experience is that. my experience was of some girls like going and getting chips after school, talking about, you know, boys and silly reality TV like that was my experience. So yeah, some girls is top of the list.
What about yours, Russell?
Oh, me? Oh, my God.
Yes.
I'm so old, I got like an erotic thrill out of cave paintings. So, honestly, there's a very sexy soldier at the back of Rembrandt's The Night Watch that I really like. And literally, when I was young, there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing on television. So, I mean, it was literally black and white. And so you'd search for that. You know, you could write essays about a queer audience's search for symbolic characters like that. And I very powerfully, there was a very great series, 1976, so I was 13, there's a great series called Rock Follies, written by a gay man called Howard Schuman. It's a brilliant piece of work. And it was all kind of coded. It was all very strong women who were like metaphors or stand-ins for the gay men. And and they were brilliant. But there was simply one scene in there where a man was talking in a pub and he didn't know who he was. He was chatting away. And then the gag was he stood up and he was the stripper. And he unzipped a black leather jacket. And that was like I can remember it like being punched in the face. Because you'd never seen anything like that on television, ever. He had big, amazing black hair. And that's Nathaniel, that's still a thing with me. It's like the hair. He had hair like yours. And yeah, amazing. Isn't that funny you remember them so powerfully, those things?
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's like scar tissue.
It's interesting because you've been in fantasy series. And I always found the depiction and representation in fantasy a little bit off for me because, for example, I remember Game of Thrones, set in this fictional world, fictional lands, fictional characters, not even Earth, but they still criminalized homosexuality, which is a colonial Victorian construct. And yet they continued that in their fantasy world. And then in Shadow and Bone, suddenly you had this fantasy world where actually it was okay for two characters to walk around holding hands and be a same-sex couple.
Yeah. It was really, really special. I think, for those of you who don't know, Shadow and Bone's part of a trilogy of books by Leigh Bardugo. And I play a character who's part of a sort of a found family of thieves and criminals. And what was really, really wonderful about getting to do that show was discovering this character, discovering the books, and realizing that I really wish I'd read these books when I was a teenager. I wish I had access to it. I wish I knew what this was, because Wylan, the character I play, has so much baggage and so much story and so much adventure, and he's in this world of gangs and criminals and fantasy and battles and all this stuff, and his queerness, it's never ever spoken about. He just exists like that. He just has a boyfriend. He just hangs around with someone, and it's more so about his upbringing, his life, his baggage, his backstory, and that really meant a lot to me. And I think when we were shooting it as well, it was really, really clear how rare that is, I think, especially in TV and film, especially in fantasy as well. It was really interesting to read the scripts, which was so wonderful, and then realize, there's so many scenes in the first couple of drafts where it can be really quickly sexualized, or really quickly physical, or really quickly like, we have these two male characters, let's put them together straight away, that's what people want to see. And actually, I remember thinking and saying, it feels so much more, impactful, or to me, what felt more exciting was seeing them hold hands, seeing them existing, seeing them exist in the small moments in this universe in which they are never going to be in trouble for the love that they share together. That's just never going to be a part of their story, which is so magic.
When they formulate their relationship and Jasper offers him a key to his room.
Yeah.
Very cute.
Yeah, exactly. They can live in this sort of cozy world they build together, but it's not that they're, this queer couple have finally found safety as a queer couple. It's they finally found safety from all the danger outside, all the wild stuff, all the fights they've been going through. But they were always destined to be in love, and they're allowed to flirt, they're allowed to fall out. But it's really special. I think Leigh Bardugo did an amazing job of crafting this world of found family, and every one of the characters, especially these crow characters, I'm one of them, I think really speaks to people. And it's like what I said before about finding like queer experience, not necessarily just through sort of physical love, but in just certain tones, certain themes, certain vibes. Like the found family aspect of that was so important to me, finding that group of people that he wanted to be a part of and to be accepted by, but not because he was gay, because he wanted to just prove himself as brave as them, you know? It was really, really special.
I think similarly, Belle in Heartstopper, one of the things I love is how Yasmin's story, and it's Naomi, isn't it, your character? Yes. How their struggle with their transness is not part of the story.
Yeah.
And that's so refreshing to see.
It's like not really mentioned, I think, especially with Elle's character. It's so nice to see her kind of, it's nice to show that like trans people go through everything else that everyone else goes through and are dealing with the same things of like trying to fit in, trying to make friends, dealing with love interest, dealing with boys. Like, it's what we're all dealing with, and it's nice that it's not necessarily speaks about too much, because it's just nice to show that aspect. It normalizes it. It makes it feel a lot more normal and a lot more just real life. Yeah.
Nathaniel, obviously, you worked with Russell on It's a Sin, which we spoke about before. I mean, the cultural and social impact of that, it still gives me goosebumps, because I sort of grew up in the shadow of, like in the years after the AIDS crisis, where actually our being, like our sexual relations with another guy had to come with protection, otherwise fear of death, until years later there were treatments, and now there's PrEP and there's all sorts of things. For you, what was it like when you were casting that role in your conversations with Russell about bringing that era to life?
So I actually didn't expect to get the role at all, because, and I've spoken to Russell in great depth about this, because I'd never done any screen work before. I was halfway through my first job. I was approaching 30 quite rapidly, and I just didn't think that he would take a chance on me. And then when I got the phone call, I was so like blindsided by it, because I read it, and it was such a beautiful script. Like, I mean, we all know the show is spectacular, and I think when I read it, I was so in love with it that there was a part of me that was like, oh well, I won't be in it. But then actually bringing that world to life, I think it was much easier than I thought it would be, and I think that's down to Russell, but also because how genuinely gorgeous all the cast are, and how lovely and how warm that set was. I heard Russell saying, like, it's not a story about HIV and AIDS. It's actually it's a love story. It's a story about a group of people that are struggling, that are trying to, fall in love, and, trying to get through life, because we all know that, life is tough, and especially when you're at that age and you don't really know who you are, what you want. And it was, with all of the HIV and AIDS research that we've been doing looming over us, it was so easy to very quickly be able to form the friendships, and that was the important part of the story, because yes, you had the scientific facts and what actually happens to them, but it was more about the relationships and how these people weren't at the forefront, discovering medical, things all about it. It was just people just trying to deal with it, and it was so awful. Just the research was so painful, because I was born in 1990, so I was kind of at the tail end of it all. And I was so unaware of it. We weren't taught about it in school, so then the research was my education. And I do think that is something that has to change. It does need to be taught about in schools. And yeah, it was just, for such a sad show, it was really the best time. We had just so much fun.
But I think for countless queer people out there, it will be their first encounter with learning about the HIV crisis and the AIDS crisis of the 80s, because it's not taught about in schools. So that surely must have been something that was on your shoulders when you were writing it, that this is going to be the first encounter that the vast majority of people in this room, and perhaps watching this, had never ever learned about it.
But it was funny, because at the other end of the scale, in 1998, when I was writing Queer as Folk, that was all we ever got talked about. If you were gay, you were connected to HIV. that was it. And
Your
stories
sex
would
meant
crop
death.
Up. Stories in soap operas would crop up. Stories, every other week in Casualty, someone would crop up. And those dramas are very underrated and do a very good job at constantly funneling issue and sexuality-based stories on a regular basis. At 8 o'clock at night, you watch something like Waterloo Road now. It's fantastic. At putting a really diverse bunch of kids up on screen. I love that show. But back then, whenever a gay man cropped up in something, it was an HIV story. So then it was a very big move that pissed off a lot of people. I got in a lot of trouble with people who worked in HIV and AIDS who were devastated that this program wasn't advancing the cause. But my stance was like, we are more than this, and we are only being defined by this, and I absolutely refuse to be defined by that. Actually, if you look at Queer as Folk, HIV is mentioned in every single episode. So they go to a charity night, someone who died. There's always, I'm not daft, there's always something there, because that's the warp and the weft of our lives. But I had other things to say. So then at the other end of the scale, so then 20 years later I go and write It's a Sin to deliberately to redress the balance, but also I think because I think it took me that long, having lived through those years, it took me that long to come to terms with it. To kind of when you grow up with people dying from a sexual disease, it's the only life you ever lead. So it's completely normal to me. So it almost took me kind of 20, 30 years to kind of look back and go, that's not normal. That shouldn't happen. That doesn't happen to everyone else. So it was a long process and ongoing. I'll write something else. There's more things to say, I hope.
I love what you said earlier, Noah, about recognizing the people you grew up with, because I think that's fundamental to allowing us to find our space somewhere. Like I really resonate with you talking about those South London girls, and everything. Where was the first queer character that you remember seeing on screen?
Oh God, I don't know. It's strange to think that it actually probably wasn't that long ago either. But I remember I remember when I was maybe 13 and I first watched, if you're 13, don't watch the show, but Orange is the New Black. And I remember don't watch it, it's so inappropriate for that age. But I remember the character of Poussey, who's played by Samira Wiley, and watching, obviously the circumstances of that show are so interesting. They're in a prison and, they've got there's so much baggage that comes with their existence. But to watch her kind of exist as a black queer woman and it never sort of be her, it never became her personality, do you know what I mean? On that show, it was how she was kind and she was allowed to be soft and vulnerable, and then the way her story finishes is obviously so tragic, but nothing to do with her sexuality. It's, it was just really it was wrapped up in so much humanity that, I was really taken with that. But I think about that, and that wasn't even that long ago. That's not, I can't think of any that when I was growing up, when I was really a kid that I ever saw. So probably those are the first ones.
I do think, because we live in the golden age of TV now.
Yeah.
There is so much out there and so much representation that it's very easy to forget how recent that is.
Yeah, and Orange is the New Black was on Netflix when Netflix was not Netflix.
Yeah.
It was the second show they'd ever made. So, you're watching it on your computer, in your bedroom on your own. You're not watching it on a TV or with loads of people. So it did feel it felt really new and radical and something that hadn't been done before. So it was a big deal, yeah.
There actually is a bit of resonance there actually to the stories that you've probably heard endlessly about people watching Queer as Folk privately.
Yes.
And away from their families.
I hear that
in
story
the same
far
way.
too much detail. Don't tell me. It's funny what you're saying, though. Do you know about representation, which is that I absolutely agree. And at the same time, and I'm one of the last few terrestrial viewers. I'm sitting there watching terrestrial television go out. You can still watch every night between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock, not a queer character turn up. You still get and on Netflix and stuff, you can still get 10-part thrillers without a single gay man or woman in it, or trans person. And I've got friends who make these things. And I sit there with them going, couldn't you do something about that? And they always sort of say to me, well, it's not a gay story. And I sit there going, I don't mean you don't have to make your lead character gay, but where's the lesbian sister? Where's the trans kid? Where's the neighbor, the two men living next door? All those supporting casts, still not enough work is done in that area.
Because I think that's where authenticity comes in is when it's not part of the storyline. It's just
But it's
there,
a kind of odd default, because the people you're talking to, they might be straight writers, they might be straight directors, they might be straight producers, but they work in drama. They got fucking tons of queer friends. It's like, you know, if you're working in television drama, you have a nice lefty liberal life. Yeah. So there's some odd little filter that maybe it's just automatic because their life is straight. Maybe it's a little assumption that it'll be more trouble to get on a network. Maybe there's an assumption maybe now also, in fairness, in these days of authenticity, there's a fear like, oh, I won't write that authentically. I'm not the lesbian neighbour, so therefore I can't write her in and I'll get in trouble for it. So in some ways, our own campaigning and our own standards can be destructive, slightly. So it's interesting. There is further to go.
Do you think there's a fear of tick boxing then that the channel needs to do? It's like, a tick boxing where a network might be like, oh, we've done X number of gay programs.
I've got to be honest, I've never noticed that, but anyone who thinks that wouldn't have me in the room. So maybe they are there saying that's enough gays, but they wouldn't say it in front of me, would they?
And actually, your comments really raise another interesting question about straight actors playing queer roles.
Yeah.
So I think we'll go to you guys first, actually. Like, obviously, there's so many roles out there, and do you fear that you're only going to be cast in a queer role, Nathaniel?
Oh, God. I'm going to preface what I say with, I am not a decision maker. I am an actor. I went to drama school. I struggle. I go to auditions. I lose 9 parts out of 10 that I audition for. My experiences of it are, we've all seen the stereotypes. We've all seen it done. We've all seen queer people being butchered by actors. And I think we're all thinking about the same person. But then there's got to be an authenticity to it, in my opinion. If it's done with respect, some of the greatest performances in the last 20, 30 years, which you wouldn't have seen, are like Tom Hanks in Philadelphia. You think about Rooney Mara, Cate Blanchett. You think about Timothée Chalamet. You think about all these amazing characters who are played by amazing actors. But I was having this conversation with my agent the other day, actually, about it, and he said, there's got to be at least one queer person in it, in the couple. And All of Us Strangers, I don't know if anyone's seen that. I watched it a couple of weeks ago. Absolutely fell in love, bawled my eyes out, and Andrew Scott, I think, is one of the finest actors of our generation, and I think Paul Mescal does a beautiful job, but there is something in Andrew's eyes that you just recognize, and there is a depth to his sadness that only a queer person can see and can believe. And so I think if it's done with authenticity, and also see queer actors for it. Don't just hand it over to someone because they're popular at the moment. See the queer actors. If Russell didn't give me the chance to audition for It's a Sin, I would not be sat here. I can guarantee you. I am 6'5", I'm brown, I'm awkward, I don't know how to answer questions. Like, it's
doing very well.
I'm sweating. But it's got to be fair, you know? If a queer person plays a queer role, people are like, oh yeah, very well done, lovely. But if a straight actor plays a queer role, a lot of the time they're like, give him an Oscar. That's where I'm going to end that.
Belle, there's a lot of times in the past, famous trans roles on TV and film have been played by straight people. Eddie Redmayne, not so long ago, said he would not have taken that role now. As a trans person watching that, how do you feel when someone who is not trans is cast as a trans character?
I think what I will say is I think it's changed a lot since Danish Girl. I feel like trans people are way more, definitely 10 years ago, it's so different to where it is now. I think, look, like, I could probably list the amount of not well-known trans actresses in the UK. There's not that many. So therefore, to already take away from a very small minority is so frustrating. And I think also, like, as you were saying earlier, is the character doesn't need to be trans. Like, I am a woman. Like, I can play a woman very capably. Like, I think there is a murky line when it comes to a character transitioning, but again, if you're a straight cis person, you will never know what it's like to be a trans person ever. So you cannot, as much as you try and get into that role, it's something that you'll never be able to really understand. As you say, like, you can see in someone's eyes when they're really trying to play that role. And yeah, I think it's something that I've been chatting to my agent about a lot recently as well. I think it would be nice to see, like, I would love to be a Disney princess. Like, I think that would be, like, so fun and also shake up the world a bit. But yeah, I think it would be nice to see trans people playing cis roles, trans roles, and I think at the end of the day, we're a minority. We need to represent ourselves as well. So, yeah.
On the casting, Russell, where do you sit on that? Straight actor, it's very volatile, isn't it?
It demands a lot of time, actually. It's a very big subject and very complicated. For example, I think what's happened recently, it was kind of considered to be quite scandalous that Andrew Scott wasn't nominated for a BAFTA for that movie. And actually, what I think happened there was when a gay man plays a gay man, he's not considered to be acting.
Yeah.
I genuinely think that happened there, that people thought, oh, he's very good, but he's gay. So he's not acting there.
Like he's not reaching.
Like he's not reaching. Okay. So he was just being himself.
Yeah.
Which actually undermines every Oscar won by a straight actor.
You know, so I'm the one saying gay people should play gay people, and yet that's what happens. A world-class performance was massively underrated because he's gay, and very publicly and visibly gay. So that's how complicated it is. I very publicly and loudly proclaim that gay actors should play gay roles, knowing full well that I'm not in charge of the entire industry. That's what people don't get. That's not a rule. It pisses off and frightens straight people. That's a marvelous thing. That's brilliant. But it's like, I'm not in charge. There might be 500 auditions tomorrow that I'm not in. They don't have to listen to me. They don't have to pay any attention to what I say. And they will do what they want. But all I'm trying to do is shift it slightly so that more queer people are seen for queer roles. The door is more open, because I know unemployed gay actors. I know them. I watch roles, and I do sit watching straight people in roles going, why have you got that part? I could name 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 actors who could be in that part. And also, when you talk about roles going to Kate Blanchett, we talk about roles going to Andrew Scott, people like that, when you talk about straight people occupying those roles, there aren't enough famous gay actors to fill those roles. Yeah. That's because they're not given roles in the first place. So that becomes a because a big name isn't just a big name. A big name finances the bloody film. Yeah. That's what goes on. You get Kate Blanchett, there's 10 million quid. Or 100 million quid. There it is. What gay names can you put in there? Andrew Scott's becoming that now. There's Ben Whishaw. That's about it. Yeah. And even Ben Whishaw is much more of an indie actor. You know, he'll do your Mary Poppins, he'll do Paddington, but he's much more of an indie actor, really. He doesn't want to be leading blockbusters. He doesn't want to be leading £100 million budgets. So we can't get in. So that's the reason why I take an extreme position, is because only by taking an extreme position can you start to tilt the seesaw, which otherwise is weighed, to continue my metaphor, very heavily against us. That's a seesaw. So, and I won't stop. No argument I've heard will make me stop doing it.
Wonderful seesaw there. I think we're going to wrap up shortly, but I just want to find out from everybody, what is the one terrible queer trope you'd like to see get rid of on screen, in film and TV? Oh my God. You go first.
I haven't got one, because a bad trope is just waiting for a good writer to make it good. You know, I'll hate the gay man shopping thing, the funny gay man turning up. But someone will write that brilliantly tomorrow, and I'll be going, oh, I love you. So I refuse to censor anything. Go on, follow that.
I actually don't know.
Any stereotypes that you'd like to dispel?
Oh, I don't know. Okay. I know now. I don't know if it's a trope, but I think just allowing any queer character to exist as they exist. So I remember I worked with a director once, and they said, "Can you not be so effeminate?" And I went, right. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And they were like, well, just like the way you're coming across as feminine. And I went, but because the character's really effeminate and really camp. And I was like, I'm reading.
Who was that? Name names.
It was. No, absolutely not. No. We'll talk. I think that just allowing them to exist, because like I think what sometimes is failed to be recognized is that queerness doesn't have an appearance. It doesn't have we don't have like one united thing that like everyone's going to have. Either it's going to be really effeminate, or people are going to be masc or more femme or more sort of gender. There's no subscription. Like, we're just going to do what we're going to do. So ever being asked to like play down or play up something, I always get a bit, I protest it. Yeah.
For myself, I think it's promiscuity. I think stop over-sexualizing queer people. I think you said it beautifully. Like, allow them to live and breathe in the moments where it's just them being like sat at home watching TV. Like, it doesn't just need to be constantly sex-driven. And I think that, especially like the violence in the sex, out, done, leave it. No, I don't want it.
I would just say, like, people don't need to be obviously queer. Like, I feel like when you look back through TV, it's always been like the gay character has always been so eccentric and so over the top, and it's to show that it's obvious. But like most, it's just it's so overdone, and I feel like now, as you said before, like it can just be a queer person being themselves, and that is enough. So it didn't have to be anyone extra.
Jack.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to see more sort of queer, I use that as an umbrella term, but it's queer softness and bisexual characters who are soft, and asexual representation. And I think a really important thing as well is behind the camera, sort of visible queer people telling queer stories. And I use that word carefully because I think to be out, to be visibly queer, I think can oftentimes come from a place of privilege, and that it's not safe for everyone. But it just means so much as an actor, especially playing a queer role, especially in Shadow and Bone, where the story wasn't it wasn't my story. I was one of 16 characters, and I was the one who had a boyfriend and was going through this stuff. But like to just clock eyes with the people behind the camera or people within the vicinity who understand where you're coming from and understand your point of view, I think like politically is important, but also humanly, physically it just makes the work easier. So I think that visibility is important. But I say that knowing that it isn't easy for everybody, and also I believe in everyone's right to be able to discover those things. But I think, that visibility and softness, I think, are super radical.
That's a wonderful note to finish on. So I want to thank all of you for the incredible work you've done. Russell for changing the game, moving the needle, and just literally rewriting society through the work you've done. So Russell, Noah, Nathaniel, Belle, and Jack. And I think we're done.
Student Prize. Make some noise for our panelists, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
The panelists,
That was fabulous. What, are we having a meet and greet now, Russell? Is that what's happening? You need an extra wristband for that. But speaking of wristbands, you've actually